Welcome, everybody, once again to the Entertainment Brothers, your weekly look under the hood at the machinery of the entertainment business. I am your showbiz Sherpa number one, or just no number, because we don't do numbers, because the Sherpas don't do numbers.
No.
Larry Hackett.
Yes. And I am Thomas Valentino. I'm an entertainment attorney.
Thomas, there's a lot of stuff we want to talk about. We're going to be revisiting the Depp Heard case, but there's a kind of overarching umbrella of a number of other stories that are all tied together that I think is really interesting. Why don't you kick off?
Well, what's starting to happen, it seems like Me Too is starting to come back a little bit.
It's about time.
Yes. Women are beginning to stand up for Amber Heard, feeling bad for her, feeling that she's being mistreated, feeling that a lot of what's happening is being misrepresented. And so we haven't seen that in a while.
No.
And we're beginning to see it again. So this is something that we're going to talk more about.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There was at least 3 or 4 big pieces over the past 10 days or so in the Washington Post.
Yes.
3 at least in the New York Times opinion pages, and a terrific piece in BuzzFeed by a woman named Stephanie McNeil. The thrust of it all being that Amber Heard is being railroaded to some degree by Johnny Depp, to a massive degree by social media. There are any number of stories about the Team Johnny groupies that are out there. There was one poll that found that of 2,300 Twitter handles, 90% were on Team Johnny. If you look at the live chat, when you watch the actual testimony, it is horrifying. I've had to turn it off every time. The attacks on this woman that are just unbelievable. And what's interesting is that for weeks and weeks, the trial is now in its 5th or 6th week.
Yes.
There was nothing from the punditocracy whatsoever, and certainly not from feminists or women who would describe themselves as feminists. And then suddenly over the past week, I think having been called out to some degree by others, they suddenly came to Heard's defense. It's an interesting take on Heard herself and her testimony, but I think some people finally came to see a certain clarity in what's going on. I'm one of these people. I watched Amber Heard testify and go, well, she's not that good, and she's looking at the jury, and there's some questions about her veracity. And then I finally kind of shook my head and said, wait. This isn't what that is about. And what you start to find are these old tropes, you know, whether it's Hester Prynne or, you know, somebody else who's wearing the scarlet letter, that take place here. The most interesting piece I've read so far, at least when it comes to kind of a media take, was Stephanie McNeil in BuzzFeed, where she pointed out that what's going on with Amber Heard, you can count from today, 10 years from now, there'll be a documentary about how awful we treated Amber Heard, just like there's been documentaries about Britney, Monica Lewinsky, Janet Jackson, Anna Nicole Smith, right? There is a kind of cultural redemption industry that goes on where we all kind of go, I can't believe that happened. Not that I can't believe I did that, but I can't believe what the media, what the paparazzi, fill in the blank. Well, what's going on right now is that you, dear social media person, are the people who are victimizing this woman. It's, to me, it's absolutely breathtaking, and it's happening in real time.
Well, we said last week that this case is now at the point where it's being litigated outside of the courtroom, or what's going on outside of the courtroom is almost more interesting than what's going on inside the courtroom.
Absolutely. This case kicked off being technically hanging by a thread, being about defamation. It is getting, with each week, further and further away from the legal case.
But
right?
why would we think that it wouldn't do that?
I suppose. But why
it would always do that.
But why? But I am somewhat, I don't want to say I'm mystified, but the unbelievable attacks on this woman are incredible. It's as if only in the abstract can we kind of cling to the ideas of Me Too, but in the actual practical, we can't do it. I do have an observation that I think might offend some people, but I'm going to make it anyway.
Good.
When Harvey Weinstein was on trial, the support for the women in that case, and the allegations in that case, was almost universal. You heard no one defending Harvey. And I'm going to tell you why I think that is, to some degree, why. Harvey looked the part of a sexual predator. He looked like Shrek. He looked like an ogre. He looked like the stereotypes that we are now dealing with in a different way in the Amber Heard case. Harvey was the monster, the kind of almost disfigured monster. Amber Heard is the scheming, double-crossing Black Widow, right? She's a combination of Kathleen Turner and Barbara Stanwyck.
Yes.
I'll leave those movies to you. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
And we are now dealing with these stereotypes. Whereas Johnny Depp is Johnny Depp. He's still a cool dude, even though he's kind of falling apart. And people can't either they're unable or unwilling to conceive of him being this bad guy. I say all of this, though, and then pull myself back saying, this is not an assault case.
Correct.
Right? We're not trying to prove who hit who.
Correct.
And that, in terms of the public consumption of this thing, is getting harder and harder. I cannot imagine what the jury's going through. Do you think they're kind of keeping all of this outside and they're just trying to listen to the testimony?
I think the jury is completely overwhelmed in this case, and I could clearly see why that's the case. There's so much information. At a certain point, I'm a little surprised that so much is being allowed to come in for them to consider, and also the witnesses that are being brought forth. So what you have is, like you said, you start out with a defamation case, and then it turns into a circus.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yep.
And this right now, if you're watching The Offer, there is a point where the woman says to Al Ruddy, we signed up for this, right? This isn't a business. This is a circus that we chose to be in.
Yeah.
So why are you so surprised that this has become a circus and that you're living in a circus? And that's where we are. One of the reasons, though, one of the things I want to point out, that Amber Heard, I saw sort of a turning point, has been the subject of a brutal cross-examination by Camille Vasquez, who is Johnny Depp's attorney. I know you're kind of like, what?
I want to hear what you think.
She's just pummeling her, absolutely pummeling her. And it's. I have to say, as a lawyer, I just see some of the things she's doing. I think she's brilliant. I think she's making a name for herself. There's rumors that, she and Johnny might be dating. I don't think that's true. You just get very close to someone when you're doing a trial for 2 years.
Or maybe it's one more unbelievably horrible retrograde stereotype, like, well, she's cute, he's cute, maybe they're dating.
I like that. Ugh. I love that expression, retrograde stereotype.
Well, it's true.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Let me just take issue. Go ahead.
Go,
How many more to say about Vasquez's tactics?
I'm in awe. I'm in awe of her cross-examination.
Why do you think it's so effective?
Well, they had Harvey Levin on. And he was talking about
TMZ. We'll get to him in a minute.
Right. How she was objecting a lot, okay? But in the cross-examination part, where she's cross-examining Amber, what she's doing is her rhythm and her style and the intensity of her questions. It's very, very hard to break her rhythm. So what tends to happen when you're a witness, when someone is coming at you like that, if you're not trained, and I'm not saying Amber hasn't been trained by her attorneys, but you can almost get hypnotized by the cross-examination questions and fall into a pattern that the attorney is trying to get you to fall into and succumb to that. And I think that's some of what's happening here, is the fact that she was subject of this rigorous cross-examination. There was a time when she cried, and it seems to me that after that point, that's when all of the social media things that have been happening started to happen.
In defense of Heard?
No, making fun of her. Well, making fun of her because she didn't seem as credible. Okay, the way I see this is at the point when she said that she pledged but didn't actually make the donation. At that point, which, if you followed, the attorney was cross-examining her and had to ask 4 or 5 questions. And Amber Heard was trying to avoid the correct answer or the answer that's the truth. And then ultimately she had to say, yes, I did make this pledge, but I haven't paid the money yet. And I think the amount of money in question is $7 million.
Right.
So that's a big thing. I think that went to her credibility, and a lot of people might have said, well, you just lied in one sense. You just lied in one sense.
Well, she also said she didn't pay it because Johnny Depp sued her.
Well, but you made the pledge. So if I make a pledge to you and, something happens in my personal life, I can't really say to you, I mean, I can legally sort of, but, Larry, I can't fulfill my pledge because, I don't know, the gardener ran over my foot or something.
In his testimony back in the beginning, and I'm surprised actually no one picked up on it in the cross-examination, Johnny Depp lied about talking to his doctor about the amount of drugs he needed to go to Australia. And he admitted to lying about it.
Right.
So if we're going to start picking about who lied, although it's about, I was going to say that sounds petty. Nothing is unpettyable in this case, right?
No,
it could get pettier and pettier.
No. I mean, everybody's lying. But then again, that's what lawsuits are all about.
Well, I disagree with you about Vasquez. I didn't think she was very good. I thought she was
Really?
trying. I just didn't think so. Because I don't think Amber Heard took the bait. I don't think she got tripped up whatsoever.
Oh,
I thought that Vasquez would raise issues like it was you who leaked it or it was you who did that, and Amber Heard would say no. And Vasquez didn't have the goods. It's not like she came back and said, "Well, here's a document that shows what's going on." I don't think they're that effective. And I say what I said in the very beginning when Depp testified. Here's an example. Johnny Depp testifies that he's suing because he doesn't want his kids to think that he's a wife beater and because he lost money and lost business, right? Because of this Washington Post op-ed piece, because we know all of Hollywood reads the Washington Post op-eds, that didn't mention him by name, but that said where she said she'd become the representative, the face of domestic abuse. And he said that was the case. In more testimony earlier this week, the Depp team brought on a Hollywood official who was involved in the Aquaman movie to counter Heard's claim that she was dropped from the sequel of the movie because of all the social media stuff. And this person said, no, we didn't pay attention to any of that. So it's like, wait a minute. It's okay for you to claim that you're being dropped because of what she wrote, but what you said about her and all of your team Depp people, that has nothing. How do you have it both ways? If you're a jury going, these two things cancel each other out, don't they?
Well, I see what you're saying, but I'm looking at it from a purely legal standpoint of an attorney cross-examining a witness and the rhythm and the intensity and the objections that she makes and the way that she makes them, when she makes them, and how she makes them. Ladies and gentlemen, mark my words, a star has been born.
I will grant you the objection piece. I did watch it as Heard's attorney was trying to ask Heard questions in direct, and Vasquez was objecting to everything.
Right.
Everything.
Love that. Love that. That's
point,
exactly what you're supposed to do.
Maybe,
That's
but at
exactly
a certain
what you're
point, if
supposed
I'm
to
a
do.
juror,
I wish I could do it.
But at a certain point, if you're a juror, you're saying, why won't she let that woman ask a question? And then you start to wonder whether or not they have something to hide.
Maybe.
All right.
Maybe.
I've covered two big trials in my career as a newspaper reporter. I covered the Mike Tyson rape trial in Indianapolis in 1991. And several weeks before that, I covered the William Kennedy Smith rape trial in Palm Beach, Florida. Two things to note about this.
Yes.
As a reporter, you need to be watching or in the courtroom almost all the time to get a sense of how a trial is going. It's kind of like, it's like watching highlights of a ball game. Unless you actually watch the ball game, you don't really know how the rhythm went, how things moved along. You watch the highlights on the news. It doesn't really capture the feeling of the game. A trial is no different.
Correct.
Right? So you can read the testimony, you can listen to us, and you'll get maybe a taste of something or a window onto it. But unless you're in the courtroom all the time, you don't get a sense of how something is going. That's thing one. The thing two is, even if you do that, you have no idea what the jury's going to do.
You still don't know. But you probably have, if we were in the courtroom right now, which at some point I hope we can start covering some of these cases from the courtroom.
Absolutely.
Who's ever out there who wants to figure out a way to get us into that position,
We'll have to get some press passes.
Please step forth. I do think that from my perspective, if I was sitting in the courtroom, I do think that I would have a better chance of predicting how they're going to rule. But then again, your point is great because in this case, there is just so much. At what point do you reach diminishing returns with the jury?
Well, that's right. And the problem is because there is so much testimony that is so juicy, the press just covers that. The press never, I have not seen one story, and believe me, I used to write them covering these other trials, trying to give the reader a sense of what's going on, where the mood is, who's got the momentum. There's been nothing like that because it doesn't have to be, because the testimony itself is so, as I said, juicy, and people just are, enjoying all of that kind of stuff.
Correct. Absolutely.
Do you still stick to your belief, your analysis, your prognostication
Yes.
that he's going to lose?
I think he's going to lose. I'm on record. My record of predicting cases is pretty good. And there is nothing that leads me to believe that he's not going to lose.
All right, before we leave this, I'm going to ask you one question about that on a legal standpoint. What is the judge going to – because what we've been discussing is there's a defamation case and there's all this salacious stuff, and they don't seem related to each other whatsoever. What is the judge going to tell the jurors when they go in to deliberate?
The judge is going to give instructions which I don't know because I'm not a judge. But the judge is going to say, this is what you have to consider. This is what you have to do. The judge is going to read them the law. The judge is going to bring in some other points of evidence. And then the judge is going to say to the jury, good luck, because this is just a crazy, crazy show that you've had to deal with.
Right.
That's what's going to happen.